The scorching midday sun beat down mercilessly on the nearly empty parking lot of the Golden Springs shopping center. The asphalt radiated heat like a giant griddle, creating shimmering waves that distorted the view of the few scattered cars. Among them, a blue sedan sat silently, its windows reflecting the harsh sunlight. To most passers-by, it was just another vehicle in the lot. But for Rocky, the African grey parrot perched in his cage outside the pet store, something was terribly wrong. Rocky had been watching the car for the past 20 minutes, his keen eyes detecting subtle movements through the tinted windows. The bird's usual cheerful demeanor had shifted dramatically. Instead of his typical whistling and playful chatter that usually entertained customers, he began emitting sharp, distressed calls that grew increasingly urgent. Sarah Chen, a veteran employee at Pete's Pets, noticed the change in Rocky's behavior immediately. In the 3 years she'd worked there, she'd never heard him make such sounds. The normally sociable parrot was now fixated on something in the parking lot, repeatedly crying out in a way that sent chills down her spine. "Hey, what's wrong, buddy?" Sarah approached Rocky's cage, trying to understand what had triggered this unusual behavior. The parrot's feathers were ruffled, his body tense. He kept bobbing his head toward the blue sedan, letting out sounds that seemed almost human in their desperation. Then Rocky did something that made Sarah's blood run cold. In a crystal-clear voice, he screamed, "Help, baby! Help, baby!" The words were unmistakable, cutting through the humid afternoon air like a knife. Sarah froze. Rocky had an extensive vocabulary, but these weren't words she'd ever heard him use before. The parrot's eyes were locked on the blue sedan, and he continued his urgent calls, now alternating between distressed squawks and those same 2 words, "Help, baby." Moving closer to the window, Sarah peered out at the car. At first glance, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The sedan sat there, unremarkable among the other vehicles, but as she looked more carefully, she noticed something odd. The windows were completely rolled up despite the sweltering heat, and there appeared to be a slight movement inside. Her heart beginning to race. Sarah grabbed her phone and stepped outside into the scorching heat. As she approached the car, the faint sound of whimpering reached her ears. Through the tinted windows, she could make out the shape of a car seat in the back. And then she saw it, a tiny hand moving weakly against the window. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, her fingers already dialing 911. The operator's voice seemed distant as she reported what she'd found, her eyes fixed on the car seat where a baby, no more than a few months old, was strapped in, clearly in distress from the heat. The parking lot had become an oven in the summer sun, and inside that closed car, the temperature would be lethal. Sarah knew from news reports that the interior of a car could reach devastating temperatures in a matter of minutes. She could see the baby's movements becoming more sluggish, its cries growing weaker. Racing back into the store, Sarah grabbed the emergency hammer they kept behind the counter for breaking glass in case of fire. Her colleague, Mike, followed her out, already understanding the gravity of the situation. But before they could act, a police cruiser came screaming into the parking lot, lights flashing and siren wailing. 2 officers jumped out, running toward the car with their own equipment. "Stand back!" one shouted, already positioning himself to break the window. The other officer had his radio out, calling for medical support. Behind them, Rocky's cries continued, his words now mixing with the chaos unfolding in the parking lot. "Help! Baby! Help! Baby!" The parrot's warning had turned into a desperate mantra, as if he understood that every second counted in this race against time. The sound of shattering glass cut through the air as the officer broke the rear window, careful to direct the shards away from the baby. A blast of superheated air escaped the car, carrying with it the unmistakable intensity of a closed vehicle that had been baking in the sun. What happened next would leave everyone at the scene in shock, their understanding of this situation about to shift dramatically. As the officers reached in to rescue the barely conscious infant, they discovered something that would turn this from a tragic accident into something far more disturbing. As Officer James Miller reached into the sweltering car, the heat inside nearly took his breath away. His hands found the buckles of the car seat, fingers working quickly to free the listless infant. The baby's skin was hot to the touch, flushed an alarming shade of red. But what made the veteran officer pause wasn't just the baby's condition, it was what he found beside the car seat. A handwritten note, partially hidden under a blanket, contained words that sent a chill down his spine despite the oppressive heat. "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. Please find someone who can love her properly. Don't look for me." The baby girl, who couldn't have been more than 3 months old, was quickly handed to the paramedics who had just arrived. Their movements were swift and practiced as they began emergency treatment, placing cool compresses on the infant's overheated skin and checking her vital signs. "Core temperature is 103.8, one paramedic called out, her voice tense. "Severe dehydration. We need to move now." As the medical team worked to stabilize the baby, Officer Miller and his partner, Officer Thompson, began processing the scene. The car's registration led to their first surprise. It had been reported stolen 2 days ago from a neighboring city. Inside, they found a diaper bag containing only a single clean diaper, an empty bottle, and a worn teddy bear with the name Emma stitched onto its foot. Sarah, still standing nearby with Rocky's desperate calls echoing behind her, couldn't take her eyes off the scene. The parrot had grown quieter now that the baby was being treated, but he remained agitated, his feathers ruffled as he paced in his cage. Detective Lisa Martinez arrived shortly after, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. She approached Sarah, notebook in hand. "Tell me everything you saw," she began, but then stopped, distracted by Rocky's continued distress. The parrot had started a new call, one that would crack the case wide open. "Mama crying, Mama crying!" Rocky screeched, rocking back and forth in his cage. Detective Martinez's attention snapped to the bird. "How long has he been saying that?" He just started," Sarah replied, her eyes widening. "Oh, so I've never heard him say those words before." The detective's expression changed subtly. In 15 years of police work, she'd learned to trust her instincts, and something about this situation wasn't adding up. A stolen car, an abandoned baby, and now a parrot that seemed to be describing something it had witnessed. This was no simple case of abandonment. Security footage from the shopping center's cameras revealed something unexpected. The blue sedan had arrived 4 hours earlier, parking initially in a different spot. 2 people had emerged, a young woman carrying the baby and a man who kept his face hidden from the cameras. They had walked toward the shopping center, but only the man had returned to the car 30 minutes later, moving it to its current location. The woman had never come back to the vehicle. Detective Martinez organized an immediate search of the shopping center and surrounding areas. Something in her gut told her they weren't just looking for a mother who had abandoned her child. They were looking for someone who might be in danger herself. Rocky's behavior had become even more erratic. The parrot now alternated between "help," "baby," and "mama crying," with increasing urgency. Sarah remembered something that made her blood run cold. Earlier that morning, she had heard what sounded like an argument in the parking lot, but had dismissed it as nothing serious. The case took another turn when Officer Thompson discovered something wedged under the driver's seat, a hospital bracelet with the name Catherine Wells, and a date from 3 months ago. A quick database search revealed that Catherine Wells had been reported missing by her parents 2 weeks earlier. Along with her newborn daughter, the story of a simple abandonment was unraveling, revealing something far more sinister. As Detective Martinez coordinated with other units to expand the search, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against time, not just for the baby, who was now being rushed to the hospital, but for Catherine Wells too. At the hospital, doctors worked frantically to cool down the infant's dangerously overheated body. Dr. Helen Parker, the attending physician, noticed something odd as she examined the baby. Recent needle marks in the infant's arm, suggesting she had been in a medical facility within the last 24 hours. But according to records, no local hospitals had treated a baby matching her description. Back at the shopping center, Rocky had grown unusually still, his eyes fixed on something across the parking lot. Detective Martinez followed the parrot's gaze to a service door that led to the shopping center's underground maintenance area. It was supposed to be locked, but as she approached, she noticed fresh scratches around the lock. What they would find behind that door would change everything they thought they knew about this case. The parrot hadn't just saved a baby. He had detected pieces of a much larger, more disturbing puzzle that was about to come to light. Detective Martinez drew her weapon as she approached the service door, signaling Officer Thompson to cover her. The scratches around the lock weren't just marks of forced entry. They told a story of desperation, of someone trying to get in, or perhaps trying to escape. The door creaked open to reveal a dimly lit stairwell descending into the shopping center's maintenance level. The air grew cooler as they descended, carrying with it the musty smell of neglected spaces and something else, the metallic hint of blood. Their flashlight beams cut through the darkness, revealing a maze of utility corridors. Water pipes ran along the ceiling, and electrical panels lined the walls. But it was the fresh scuff marks on the dusty floor that caught Detective Martinez's attention. Someone had been down here recently, and they hadn't been alone. They followed the marks to a heavy door marked Storage B7. Inside, they found evidence that the space had been recently occupied. A makeshift bed made from old moving blankets lay in one corner. Empty water bottles and food wrappers were scattered about. On the wall, someone had scratched tally marks, 14 of them. But it was what they found on a worn folding table that made Detective Martinez's heart race. Medical supplies, syringes, IV bags, and several empty vials of a powerful sedative. Beside them lay a woman's purse, its contents spilled across the table. The wallet inside confirmed their fears. It belonged to Catherine Wells. Above ground, Rocky had become increasingly agitated. The Parrot's calls had changed again, now incorporating new words. Dark, Mama Dark. Sarah, who had remained at the store monitoring the bird's behavior, immediately called Detective Martinez. The Dark, Martinez muttered, her mind racing. He's not just saying random words, he's telling us where to look. The detective ordered an immediate search of all dark spaces in the maintenance level. As teams of officers spread through the underground maze, Martinez noticed something odd about the building's layout. According to the emergency floor plan on the wall, there should be another storage room, one that wasn't marked on any of the doors they'd seen. Officer Thompson discovered the hidden entrance behind a false electrical panel. The door had been carefully concealed, but recent use had left subtle marks on the floor in front of it. As they prepared to breach the room, they heard a faint sound from within, the weak cry of a woman. Inside, they found Catherine Wells. The young mother was lying on a thin mattress, her wrists and ankles bound with zip ties. She was alive but barely conscious, showing signs of dehydration and drug-induced sedation. The needle marks on her arms matched those they had found on her baby. As paramedics rushed to treat Catherine, she managed to whisper something that sent shockwaves through the investigation. He said he needed us for the experiment. He said he had to know if the bond would survive. Detective Martinez's phone buzzed with an urgent update from the hospital. Dr. Parker had discovered something disturbing in the baby's blood work, traces of an experimental compound designed to alter emotional responses in the brain. The same compound was found in Catherine's system. The investigation quickly focused on Dr. Marcus Reed, a research scientist who had recently lost his license after conducting unauthorized experiments on emotional bonding between mothers and infants. He had disappeared 6 months ago after his facility was shut down, but not before stealing samples of his experimental drugs. But as they pieced together the evidence, something still didn't add up. The security footage showed only one man, but Catherine's fragments of memory suggested there had been 2 people involved. And then there were the words Rocky kept repeating. They seemed to be describing events the Parrot couldn't possibly have witnessed. Back at Pete's Pets, Sarah was reviewing the store's security footage from the past 2 weeks when she noticed something strange. Every morning before the store opened, a man in a janitor's uniform would stand in front of Rocky's cage for exactly 10 minutes. He appeared to be showing something to the Parrot on a tablet device. When Detective Martinez saw the footage, her blood ran cold. The janitor was Dr. Reed's former research assistant, Thomas Chen. He had been conditioning Rocky, using the Parrot's extraordinary intelligence and ability to mimic sounds to monitor Catherine and her baby. The bird hadn't just witnessed their distress. He had been deliberately trained to recognize and report it. But this revelation brought new questions. Why go to such elaborate lengths? What was the true purpose of this twisted experiment? And most importantly, where was Dr. Reed now? The answer would come from an unexpected source, one that would reveal this case to be far more complex than anyone had imagined. As Catherine Wells began to recover, her memories started to return, painting a picture of a conspiracy that went beyond one mad scientist's obsession, a conspiracy that Rocky the Parrot had been unknowingly helping to expose. As Catherine Wells regained her strength in the hospital, her memories began to surface like fragments of a dark dream. The sterile hospital room was a stark contrast to the dank underground chamber where she'd been held, but the fear in her eyes remained. Detective Martinez sat beside her bed, recording every detail as Catherine's story unfolded. Dr. Reed wasn't working alone, Catherine explained, her voice barely above a whisper. He had supporters, people who believed in his research. They called themselves the Nurture Initiative. She paused, clutching her baby Emma closer. They think they can perfect the mother-child bond through chemical enhancement. They've been doing this for years. Meanwhile, at Pete's Pets, Rocky's behavior had taken another surprising turn. The parrot had started mimicking a phone conversation, alternating between two distinct voices. Sarah, who had been recording Rocky's vocalizations at the detective's request, recognized one of them as Thomas Chen's voice. Project Sunflower proceeds. Subjects responding. Maternal separation peaks at 14 days. Rocky recited in Chen's clinical tone before switching to another voice, deeper and more authoritative. The board expects results. Thomas. The funding depends on it. Detective Martinez immediately dispatched a team to analyze the recording. The second voice belonged to Gerald Hammond, CEO of New Life Pharmaceuticals, a company that had recently filed patents for several developmental behavior drugs. The investigation uncovered a disturbing pattern. Over the past 3 years, 7 young mothers and their infants had disappeared briefly in different cities across the state. Each case was reported as a runaway situation, and each mother had reappeared within 2 weeks, with no memory of where they'd been. Their babies had all shown traces of unknown compounds in their blood work, but the cases had never been connected until now. Dr. Parker's analysis of Emma's blood samples revealed something even more sinister. The compound wasn't just meant to enhance maternal bonding, it was designed to create a biochemical dependency between mother and child. The forced separation was part of the experiment, measuring how the enhanced bond would respond to extreme stress. Sarah, still monitoring Rocky, made another crucial discovery. The parrot had been mentioning numbers in sequence: 6, 1, 2, 4. She found security footage of Chen entering these numbers into his tablet while standing in front of Rocky's cage. It was a code. But for what? Detective Martinez recognized the number pattern. It matched the password format used by New Life Pharmaceuticals for their secure facilities. A search warrant for New Life's local research center was quickly obtained. When the police raided the facility, they found a hidden laboratory in the basement. Dr. Reed wasn't there, but they discovered extensive documentation of his experiments. The files revealed that the Nurture Initiative wasn't just conducting unauthorized research, they were developing a drug that could be used to manipulate the emotional bonds between parents and children on a massive scale. But the most shocking discovery came from an unexpected source. Rocky, who had been brought to the police station for protection, suddenly began repeating a new phrase: Sunday Protocol. Sunday Protocol, followed by what sounded like a countdown. Catherine's eyes widened in recognition when she heard about this. Sunday was their code word for the final phase, she explained, her voice shaking, and they planned to test the compound on a larger scale at a hospital. The investigation revealed that New Life had recently acquired control of the pediatric ward at City General Hospital. They were planning to introduce the compound into the hospital's infant care protocols, using hundreds of newborns and their mothers as unknowing test subjects. Thomas Chen was arrested trying to flee the country, but Dr. Reed and Gerald Hammond remained at large. The countdown Rocky kept repeating suggested they were running out of time to stop the Sunday Protocol. Detective Martinez knew they were close to unraveling the entire conspiracy, but something still bothered her. The timing of Rocky's warnings about the baby in the car seemed too perfect. It was as if someone had wanted the parrot to expose the plot. But who? The answer came from a surprising confession. In the interrogation room, Chen finally broke down and revealed the truth about Rocky's role in the experiment. The Parrot hadn't just been trained to monitor the subjects, he had been part of a more complex plan, one that would lead to an explosive confrontation at City General Hospital. As night fell over the city, Rocky became increasingly agitated, repeating one phrase over and over: "Tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow." The race to prevent the Sunday protocol from being implemented had become a desperate countdown, but no one could have predicted the shocking twist that would turn everything they thought they knew upside down. Dawn broke over City General Hospital as Detective Martinez coordinated teams into position. The facility's pediatric ward was scheduled to receive a new shipment of routine supplements that morning. The Sunday protocol was about to begin. Security footage showed Dr. Reed had entered the building an hour earlier, disguised as a maintenance worker. But something about the situation felt wrong to Martinez. Years of detective work had taught her that when things seemed too obvious, there was usually another layer to uncover. Rocky's continued agitation at the police station suggested the same. The Parrot had started combining his phrases in new ways. "Dark mama help doctor." Catherine Wells, against medical advice, had insisted on coming to the hospital. "There's something you need to know about Dr. Reed," she told Martinez, her voice trembling. "He wasn't just experimenting on the mothers and babies. He was trying to recreate something he'd lost." As officers moved into position throughout the hospital, Sarah made a breakthrough at the police station. Reviewing historical footage from Pete's Pets, she discovered something shocking. 6 months before any of this began, a woman who looked remarkably like Dr. Reed's deceased wife had visited the store with her baby. They had spent hours in front of Rocky's cage, the woman crying, the baby distressed. The Parrot had learned his warning calls not from Chen's training, but from genuine distress he'd witnessed. Martinez's phone buzzed with an urgent message. The hospital's head nurse had just reported something suspicious. Dr. Emily Chen, Thomas Chen's wife and the hospital's pediatric supervisor, had just accessed the secure pharmaceutical storage using her override codes. She hadn't been scheduled to work that day. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Dr. Emily Chen wasn't just Thomas's wife, she was Dr. Reed's daughter. The conspiracy went deeper than anyone had realized. The Nurture Initiative wasn't just about developing a new drug. It was about a father's twisted attempt to help his daughter overcome the grief of losing her mother by chemically engineering the perfect parent-child bond. As SWAT teams converged on the pharmaceutical storage area, Rocky's voice came through Sarah's phone, which was still connected to the station. "Doctor, help! Doctor, help!" But this time, Martinez heard something different in the Parrot's tone. It wasn't a warning, it was a revelation. Inside the storage facility, they found Dr. Emily Chen, but not as they expected. She was crying, holding a syringe away from herself, while Dr. Reed stood frozen, his own syringe dropped at his feet. The experimental compound lay spilled across the floor, permanently neutralized. "I couldn't do it, Dad," Emily sobbed. "I couldn't let you do to these babies what you tried to do to mine." The truth emerged like a thunderbolt. Emily had been the first test subject, unknowingly dosed by her own father shortly after her baby was born. When she discovered what he'd done, she had turned to her husband Thomas for help. But instead of stopping the experiments, Thomas had seen an opportunity to profit from Dr. Reed's research, partnering with New Life Pharmaceuticals to expand the trials. Emily had been the one to place Rocky at Pete's Pets, knowing the Parrot had witnessed her own distress months earlier. She had orchestrated Catherine's rescue by ensuring the stolen car was parked where Rocky could see it. The Parrot hadn't been trained to recognize distress. He had learned it naturally from Emily's own experience. "I needed someone to witness what was happening," Emily explained later in custody. Someone who couldn't be silenced or bought off. Rocky was perfect, a creature of pure empathy, who could communicate what he saw without anyone understanding the full truth until it was too late to stop the exposure. Catherine Wells held her baby Emma closer as she listened to Emily's confession. The bond between them was strong not because of any chemical enhancement, but because of the natural connection they shared, the very thing Dr. Reed had tried so desperately to artificially recreate. Gerald Hammond and several New Life executives were arrested, attempting to destroy evidence at their headquarters. The investigation uncovered dozens of similar experiments across the country, all of which were now being shut down. At Pete's Pets, Rocky returned to his normal, cheerful self, though he had earned a special place in the hearts of everyone involved in the case. Sarah noticed that he had picked up one final phrase, which he would repeat sometimes in a gentle, almost thoughtful tone. "Love real, love real." Detective Martinez closed the case file, but the lessons remained. The strongest bonds couldn't be engineered in a laboratory. They grew from love, trust, and the natural connection between parent and child. Sometimes it took a parrot's simple wisdom to remind humans of this fundamental truth. Catherine and Emma became regular visitors to Pete's Pets, their presence a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the unbreakable bond between mother and child. And Rocky, the unexpected hero of this strange and twisted tale, continued to watch over his corner of the world, ready to raise the alarm if anyone else ever needed help. As for Emily Chen, she received a reduced sentence in exchange for her cooperation in dismantling the remaining networks of the Nurture Initiative. Her own journey of redemption had begun with a parrot's cry and ended with the truth that real love, in all its imperfect glory, was more powerful than any chemical compound could ever be. The story of Rocky's warning became a reminder that heroes come in all forms, and that sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that speaks for those who cannot speak for themselves. 5 years later, the newly renovated Pete's Pets gleamed in the morning sunlight, its windows spotless and its sign freshly painted. Inside, amid the cheerful chaos of animals and customers, Rocky's cage occupied a place of honor near the front window. The African grey parrot, now something of a local celebrity, had grown a bit older but no less observant. His feathers had taken on a distinguished silver sheen, and his eyes still held that same keen intelligence that had saved so many lives. Sarah Chen, formerly just Sarah, stood behind the counter, now wearing a manager's badge and a wedding ring. After the events that had shaken their community 5 years ago, she had not only been promoted, but had also found love in an unexpected place, with Officer Thompson, who had initially come by the store to check on Rocky and never quite stopped visiting. The bell above the door chimed as Catherine Wells entered, holding the hand of a bright-eyed kindergartner. Emma, now 5 years old, had grown into a vibrant child with her mother's resilient spirit. She immediately ran to Rocky's cage, her backpack bouncing with each step. "Rocky, look what I made!" Emma held up a crayon drawing of a large grey bird surrounded by colourful hearts. The parrot tilted his head, examining the artwork with his characteristic thoughtfulness before declaring, "Beautiful, love Emma." Catherine smiled, watching her daughter interact with the bird who had saved their lives. She had become an advocate for child protection and now ran a support group for mothers who had survived trauma. Her testimony had been instrumental in keeping Dr. Reed and his conspirators behind bars, where they would remain for many years to come. Emily Chen, serving her reduced sentence in a minimum security facility, had turned her experience into something positive. She worked with prison psychiatrists to develop legitimate therapeutic programs for mothers and children affected by trauma. Her own child, now 7, visited regularly with Emily's sister, their bond growing stronger despite the circumstances that had nearly destroyed their family. The story had changed policies across the country. Hospitals had implemented stricter protocols for pharmaceutical trials, and new legislation, dubbed Rocky's Law, required enhanced security measures in maternity wards and pediatric units. A foundation established in Rocky's name provided support for animal-assisted therapy programs, helping both children and adults heal from trauma. Detective Martinez, now Captain Martinez, kept a framed photo on her desk of Rocky receiving a special commendation from the city, the first ever awarded to an animal. She had learned to pay attention to unexpected warnings, no matter their source. Her department had even started a pilot program using trained animals in detective work, inspired by Rocky's remarkable intuition. Gerald Hammond and the other New Life executives had been convicted of multiple charges, their sentences ensuring they would never again be able to exploit vulnerable families. The company's assets had been seized and redistributed to support ethical research into parent-child bonding, conducted with full transparency and oversight. Thomas Chen, serving his sentence in a federal prison, had written a comprehensive confession that helped authorities identify and assist other families who had been unknowingly subjected to experiments. While his actions could never be justified, his cooperation had at least helped bring some healing to those affected. Pete's Pets itself had evolved. Sarah had transformed it into more than just a pet store. It was now a community center where people could connect with animals and each other. Regular events brought together families, therapy animals, and counselors, creating a space for healing and growth. Rocky presided over it all, his presence a reminder of the extraordinary capacity of animals to understand and help humans in ways that sometimes defied explanation. On quiet evenings, when the store was empty save for the peaceful sounds of sleeping animals, Rocky would sometimes softly repeat phrases from those fateful days: "Help, baby," "Love, real," "Mama, safe." But now these words were not warnings. They were reminders of triumph over darkness, of the power of connection, and of the unexpected ways that love could save lives. Emma, growing up with this story, had developed a special bond with animals. She often told her friends about Rocky, the parrot who had heard her cry when no one else could. Her early trauma had left no lasting scars. Instead, it had planted seeds of compassion and understanding that were already beginning to bloom. Catherine had finally found peace. The nightmares had faded, replaced by dreams of future possibilities. She and Emma lived in a small house not far from Pete's Pets, their lives interwoven with the community that had embraced them. Every morning, Catherine would look at her daughter and marvel at their journey, not just of survival but of triumph. On the wall of Pete's Pets, next to Rocky's cage, hung a simple plaque that read, "Some heroes have wings." Below it, a collection of photographs showed the lives touched by one parrot's extraordinary intervention: Emma's first day of school, Catherine's support group graduation, Sarah and Officer Thompson's wedding, Captain Martinez's promotion ceremony, and countless other moments of joy that might never have existed without Rocky's warning. And Rocky, the unexpected hero of this remarkable story, continued his watch over his corner of the world. His calls were usually cheerful now, entertaining visitors with his extensive vocabulary and playful nature. But those who knew him best understood that behind those bright eyes lay a vigilance that would never fade, a readiness to speak up, to sound the alarm, to be the voice for those who had none. As the sun set each day over Pete's Pets, casting long shadows through the windows, Rocky would often turn to the street outside and simply watch. In those quiet moments, he seemed to embody something profound about the nature of love and protection, that sometimes the most powerful acts of heroism come from the most unexpected sources, and that the capacity to care knows no bounds of species or circumstance. The story of Rocky's warning had become more than just a tale of rescue. It had become a testament to the extraordinary connections that could form between all living beings, and to the enduring power of those who choose to speak up when they witness injustice. In a world that sometimes seemed dark and frightening, Rocky remained a beacon of hope, a reminder that heroes could come in all forms, and that love, in its purest form, could bridge any gap and overcome any obstacle. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the world of captivating stories. I trust you found today's narrative as engaging as I did. If you enjoyed this exploration into fascinating and compelling narratives, kindly indicate your appreciation by liking this video. Are you watching on mobile? Show your appreciation with a double tap for hype. For more captivating stories and journeys into the heart of compelling storytelling, please subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss a single upload. Your thoughts and interpretations are most welcome. Please share your perspectives on today's story in the comments below. And if you believe others would find this content engaging, please consider sharing the video with your network. Until our next journey into the world of captivating tales, I bid you farewell.